Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome to Reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Today we're doing chapter 2 of it, continuing on the question of the virtues, or the general virtues in that sense. So, chapter 2, we talked about, first he basically addressed the question of, in chapter 1, he addressed the question of what virtue, the intellectual virtues and moral virtues, and then he focused on the moral virtues. The moral virtues or the ethical virtues, remember the term moral is translation for ethicae, and this is the way they're doing it because he's translating it to be compatible with the translators here are doing it compatible to the traditional interpretation of this, so they're being kind of conservative. Um, um, Now we're dealing with the question, and then he deals with the question of how the question of the moral or ethical virtues are because of people's activities, and the question of it's done through the question of habituation, right? And then the role of habituation. Now we're continuing from this. Now, since the present subject is taken up, not for the sake of contemplation, theoria, as others, for we are conducting an examination, not so that we may know what virtue is, but so that we may become good, since otherwise there would be no benefit from it. It is necessary to examine matters pertaining to action, praxis, right? This is a theoria, contemplation is level of theoria, or theoretical theory, theoria, and here we're looking at praxis, action, pertaining to action. That is how one ought to perform them. Now, this is how we end this sentence, this very complex introduction sentence. That we're taking this not for contemplation, but the question of action. Therefore, we're not concerned about knowing what virtue is, but how we use virtue. To what purpose virtue is used, and that is to become good, right? Virtue as the means that we achieve or become agathon, good, right? And therefore, it's necessary to refrain it to actions on how one ought to perform them, right? For these actions, for these actions, these virtuous actions, have authoritative control over what sort of characteristics come into being. Just have we said. In other words, the action, the type of behavior, the type of habits, the type of actions form the habits, and that forms the type of characteristics, right? That's, again, from what is said. Now, acting in accord with correct reason. Now, this is the problem. This famous phrase, orthologos, which translators have rendered as right reason, is ambiguous as in its components. What is orthos, correct, may or may not be true, and logos may be a rational argument or merely a speech, rational or not. In other words, this is the problem. This is the problematic or question of orthologos. Now, acting orthologos is commonly granted. Okay, we commonly grant that we arc through correct arguments, correct logos, um, and let it be posited for now. What pertains to it will be spoken later. Both what correct reason is and how it relates to the virtues, right? This is again 5, literally to the other virtues, right? This is to the other virtues. So therefore, this idea, what is meant by this? It relates to the other virtues. That's the literal meaning. So how does it relate to the virtue? I mean, I suspect this is the other virtues as well. We will talk to you later about the correct reason, not to the virtues in terms of one things, but also to the other virtues, which are maybe intellectual virtues. Because we're focusing on moral virtue, right, or ethical virtue, the virtues that concern action and doing. So therefore, what? But this question of act in accord with a correct, acting in accord to correct reason, or orthologos, right? But let it be agreed to in advance that every argument concerned with what ought to be done is bound to be stated in outline only and not precisely, just as we said at the beginning. that the demands made given arguments should accord to the subject matter in question. In other words, we're going to do it in outline. We're not going to have these full, in other words, we're not going to take it to the extreme. In other words, what is to be done? Now, this is that another line. Literally, the principal portion, the reading of the principal manuscript, following accepted by Burnett, Bywater, following Becker and Spillman, amends the text to read the translation concerned with actions. Right? They add here what is to be done concerned to action. Right? What is to be done? The question is what I think this is. What is to be done implies action, the actions, right? The arguments concerned with what ought to be done is bound to be stated only in outline and not precisely, okay? Because why? Because the nature of the arguments here accord in that subject. In other words, he goes back to the point he made even earlier, that we can't demand, and these kind of topics, we can't have over preciseness or, we're going to have to accept, for the purpose of this, we're going to get a general outline of something here, okay? So, matters of action, praxis, and those pertaining to what is advantageous have nothing stationary about them, just as matters of health do not either. So, in other words, there's not a permanence about it, okay? Matters of action and matters of action, praxis, doesn't have a permanence. This is stable. The word stationary about it means something unchanging. Okay, I think this needs to be a no. This needs to be a no. The translator's not doing thing because this is the big difference between the things that are theoria or contemplatory are things that always are. The things of action, praxis, are things that come into being and pass away, or things that change. This is why he says that he says what he says here about this, that things that have action are what? What is pertaining to what is advantageous have nothing stationary about them, nothing constant. It is not something that is going to be unchanging. Okay, it is going to be, or things that simply are or not. They come into be and pass away. They can be, and they also cannot be. Okay, but they also come into be. They're not always are or always not. They are sometimes, but then other times not. Right? They change. There's a changeableness to them. Sometimes they're here and sometimes they're not. Like health, the same thing. Health is not constant in this sense. Health is something that is changeable as we get older. To be being healthy or doing things is going to be harder, right? Yes, as matters help to that. And since such is the character of the general argument, still less precise is the argument concerning with particulars. So therefore, the question of general arguments, right, the particulars, given that this is true, but the general argument, right, well, it's going to, it is still less precise is the argument concerned with particulars, for it does not fall under an art or any set of precepts. So this point here about this idea that it's changeable, that it is not going to be something that's always, and there's a kind of probabilistic aspect towards it, right? There's going to be a situation where we can't speak of it as precise because it's not. In other words, there's not going to be an absolute pattern. He's saying here, it might be a pattern, but it's not going to be precise. Instead, those who act ought themselves always to examine what pertains to the opportune moment when it presents itself, as is the case with both medicine and piloting. In other words, what does the situation? What is the right thing to do in this moment? What is the thing that is most advantageous to the person or actor in this moment? What is the opportune? Opportune means the opportunity. What is the thing that offers you the opportunity of success or benefit or health? In other words, knowing what is the best course or what is the most optimal course, in that sense, right? Although such is the character of the present argument, one one must never, nonetheless, attempt to be of assistance. So, therefore, even though it is like this, we must give some guidance. But even though this is the truth about the situation, right? The present argument that we can't have overly precision, we can't give you something that gives you the absolute answer to understand this, but we can give you some guidance in this sense, points, assistance. This then is the first thing that must be thought about, contemplated. Such things as the virtues are naturally destroyed through deficiency and excess. So therefore, some virtues, such things, such as virtues, arete, are destroyed either through deficiency, too little, or too much, just as we see in the case of strength and health. For one ought to make use of manifest things as witness on behalf of what is immanifest. There was a quote now he says we should pay strength and health. We should pay attention to strength and health. We should make use of the things that we can see clearly see, versus what we can't really clearly see. Right? Excess is, as well as deficient gymnastic exercises, destroy strength, and simultaneously both drink and food destroy health as they increase or decrease in quantity, whereas the proportionate amount creates increase and preserves health. So too with sophosune, moderation, courage, and other virtues. He who avoids fear and fears all things and endures nothing becomes a coward. And he who generally fears nothing, but advances towards all things becomes reckless. Similarly, he who enjoys every pleasure and abstains from none becomes licentiate. But he who avoids every pleasure, as the boorish do, becomes an insensible person. Now, this is literally 7. That is, someone lacking in the sense of perception, anaethiotheos. Aristotle notes later there at 1107b8 that there really is no name for such a person, since they do not come into being very much, right? The senseless one, the insensible person. There's no real name for this because this is rather unlikely. Moderation and courage, indeed, sophosune and courage are indeed destroyed by excess and deficiency, but they are preserved by the mean. Now, this is the mesos, right? This is that famous term, the mean. The first phenomenon of the term he methotes, the mesos, right? Account of in Aristotle's account of moral phenomena or ethike. In other words, the mean. In other words, are preserved by this mean in this sense. But not only do the coming into being and increase of the virtues. Again, this is not in the Greek. This is assumed that the context, right, of the virtue. We're talking about the virtues, as well as their destruction or corruption, occur as a result of the same thing and through the same thing. But activities associated with the virtues, again, we're talking about the virtues, activities, too, will be found in the same things. In our elaboration here, as responsible for their coming into being and increase. So what is he saying here? In other words, not only coming being and increase of the virtues as well as their destruction result from the same thing and through the same thing, but the activities themselves associated with these things will found in the same thing, and that for the things that are responsible for this. For this is the case also. With other, more manifest things. So this is, for example, in the case of strength, it comes into being as a result of taking much nourishment and enduring many exertions. And he who is strong would especially be able to do just these things. In other words, you have to do something, you have to effort, you have to exertion. So, in other words, the activity, having the possession of the virtue and what destroys them requires the activity, some use of the activity, and but the activity itself is found in the for their, in other words, more, doing less, right? So as the interconnection between the activity and the virtue, right? And he says that, the strength, for strength, you need to exercise, you need to do the things, you need to exert yourself, you need to have many exertions, but you have to develop, you have to have nourishment too. So too in the case of the virtues, for as a result of abstaining from pleasure, we become sophosune, and by becoming and so becoming, we are especially able to abstain from them. In other words, once we start resisting pleasure, we don't use pleasure. We kind of avoid. In other words, we don't always engage in it. We then become moderate, sophosune, right? In this sense, um, um, then what we do is, what is the line? We abstain from them. Similarly, in the case of courage as well, by being habituated to disdain frightening things. In other words, we don't respect it. But remember, the opposite, too much, right? But no, we disdain frightening things and endure them. We become courageous, and so by becoming, we will especially able to endure frightening things. But we're still frightened by them as the strength person. In other words, courage is not, again, remember what courage, we said earlier, courage is not being afraid. It's being afraid and still being able to act. The coward is afraid and cannot act. The madman is not afraid at all, right? So therefore, this is how we end chapter 2. So let's stop here. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below. And I'll respond to them when I see them. If you like the chapter, please hit the like button. Hit the like. And if you liked it, send it to your friends. Send it to, forward it to your pals and someone else who might be interested in this. Put it on your social media. Spread the news about this. If you're not subscribed, subscribe, and if and please encourage others that you think will be interested in these things to subscribe, like to grow the channel some more. We're getting to a milestone, I hope, soon. Then next but not least, then if you didn't like it, okay, you can say hit thumbs down, right? You can say thumbs down, but say why in the comments so we can all learn from this. If you want to follow me on social media, my social media links are below. If you want to know more about me and see check out my research and scholarship, you can go to the academic social media links that are below that. Now, if you also want to help me to do what I do, you want to financially assist, the way you can do so is through Subscribestar or Patreon. Those links are also below. Or you can simply just go buy one of my books. The three books, one of my three books that are currently available, that are listed. The books themselves are listed below. You can buy them through online bookstores or through your local bookstore like that. If you really want to help and you're interested in politics, that you buy the notebook on my book called The Notebook for Aristotle's Politics. That is, through Lulu. And if you buy it through Lulu, I will get the most money. And he says that's if you want to help. Okay, well that's it. We turn next to chapter 3, on chapter 2, chapter 3, on a continuation of the question of the virtues and the examination of the virtues. So we'll stop here. Well, take care. We'll see you. We will see you next time and look at chapter 3. Take care. Have a good day. Bye bye. So long.